After completing this lesson, you'll be able to create solid modeling features in the design, add a new sketch on a model face, and apply fillets to the model. For this lesson, you can continue from the previous lesson, or you can use New Design from File to open the F1 Car First Sketch Fusion Archive file. Now that I have my basic sketch, I have a few different options on how I'd like to proceed. I can either extrude the profile to the full height, or I can use the offset plane option in the extrude tool in Fusion 360. For this lesson, let's use the extrude tool, select the profile, set the offset plane value to 24 millimeters, and then we can set our distance to -8. So the 3D feature will be starting 24 millimeters in the air and building back down 8 millimeters. There are several different approaches you might consider taking, including just creating your initial sketch on a construction plane elevated that high, or creating the next series of sketches at the bottom and extruding up into the body. Any are viable, and it's really up to what you're trying to accomplish. For now, I'll click OK, and we'll add the extrusion to the timeline and create a solid model. Next, I want to create a new sketch on the bottom of this face. This new sketch will be used to define airflow channels on the underbody of the car. I'll start the Line tool, selecting the bottom face. I can reorient if I need to. I'll select the leading edge of the side and create a straight line segment at a slight angle. From there, I'll click and drag, creating a tangent arc, and then repeat this, creating another tangent arc that leads to the inside corner of the wheel well. Continuing on with the line, I'll create another tangent arc off of the back of the wheel well to the back edge of the car. I'll only need to add one constraint to properly define the geometry itself before I apply dimensions. I'll use a tangency between the second arc and the wheel well. I can press Escape to clear that command and just move my geometry around a little bit. This is where having the dimensions will come in very handy. I'll start the Dimension tool, either from the marking menu or pressing the D key, and start to apply dimensions. The first dimension I'll apply is on the straight segment. I'll click on it, and of course I get a horizontal dimension, but if I move just right, I'll be offered an aligned dimension. That's actually the length that I want, and I'll set that to 10. Then I'll click the 2 points at the end of the line and at the end of the pod and set the offset distance to 4. Then, clicking the line and the edge, I'll be able to set an angle of 10. All of this is done with one dimension tool. In fact, now I'll click the first arc that I created and set its radius to 100. And for a last dimension, set the 2 endpoints for the portion behind the wheel at 3. You can always use Escape to get out of any tool inside of Fusion 360. And you can always move the dimensions around to make sure they're cleaned up. Next, I want to create a spline. A spline will give me smoother curvature and more control. So under the Sketch pull-down, I'll start the Spline tool, select a point at the back edge of the body, another point a little bit forward, another closer to the front, and then one last one connecting back to the center line a little farther forward. I'll use the check mark to let Fusion 360 know that I'm done placing points, and you'll see the handles that are highlighted on the spline. These handles can be leveraged to control the curvature of the spline. For right now, I'll just place some basic dimensions on the points of the spline. First, I'll locate the end point, 2 millimeters off the center line. Then the next point, I'll place it 3 millimeters from the center line at a distance of 30 millimeters from the end. The point that's furthest forward, I'll set at 120 millimeters and 8 millimeters off the center line. And then the last point will be at 170 millimeters. And for this point, I'd like to put some controls on the handle itself. The length of the handle applies what's referred to as a weight. This helps control how the curvature of the spline will transition through that point. You can also apply an angle of transition. So first I'll select the line itself, come out until I get an aligned dimension, and set the weight at 40. You'll see how this modified the curvature. Then I'll select the line again, and then the center line edge, and set an angle of 20. And when I press enter, watch how the curvature responds. Brings the curvature back in a little more smoothly and a little more closer to the center line between the first and the second points. For now, that's all the control I want to apply to the spline. You can always add more at any time. So let's stop the sketch, get another point of view, and use the extrude tool again, selecting the 3 profiles. This time, we'll drag them down and set them at a distance of 15 millimeters. The last thing that I'll do with this model is add a couple of fillets to start to get a feel of how I'm going to guide air down through the underbody of the car. The press-pull tool is a multifunction tool. If you select a profile, it will turn into an extrusion. In this case, if I select an edge, it will turn into a fillet. I'll set this radius to 15 and start the press-pull tool again using the marking menu. Select the inside edge and set the radius to 5. Let's take a look at how that appears on the underside of the body. You can see how air will be drawn underneath, and for now, that's all I want to do. Let's save the model, adding a comment. After clicking OK, the file will be uploaded to the cloud, and the tab will display version 2.